And so this is free riding, social loafing. So Vas has many, many, many things that he could be talking about, but we decided that this would be the focus for today.
Yep.
So Vas, all yours. You could share screen if you wish, whatever you want. You are co-host. So please go ahead.
All right. So when I was first originally invited to do this talk, I thought I would do the usual sort of something about X culture, something fun, something, I have an arsenal of prepared presentations that I can, do. But because we thought we would touch upon free riding, and this is a topic I've been studying for a few years, I decided to go a little bit more serious this time. And so I will not be talking much about X culture other than that some of the research I will talk about was based on the X culture sample. But instead, I will focus more on free riding itself. And I will be honest with you, this is definitely the most important topic in all of organizational behavior and HR. And so what I will talk about today is about what we know about free riding in general. And by that, I mean, I will give you the results of a meta-analysis I completed not so long ago, a study that reviewed all of the literature on the topic and sort of summarized all of the findings in one essentially table. So almost like a summary of all joint knowledge of the researchers of teams. So that would be what others have shown us so far that I summarized. And then I will talk a little bit more about sort of how that is different from practice. And it's not so much different in the sense that it's a different set of conclusions. It's how it becomes much more complicated when you move from what the theory tells you to actually trying to do it in real life. And I will support that with some of the studies that we've done based on X culture, again, into what predicts free riding, and more importantly, what can you do about it? And so it will be a little bit more serious than usual because, as I said, we will be talking about an important issue that you all, I have no doubt, have already experienced. And the worst part is that you will experience it pretty much every single time when you will be working in teams. There will be always someone who will not do his or her share, maybe not fully disappear, but definitely will do a little bit less than you expect the person to do. And so that creates all kinds of problems, tensions, performance issues. And so we'll talk about these things. And I'll share the slides, but I will be switching on and off because, again, there are some things that don't require slides, so we'll be talking directly. So one terminology. So when we say free riding, in some literature it's called social loafing, in some literature it's called free riding. Some people also call it freeloading. Some people also call it shirking. And even in one of our papers, we came up with a new term, we call it wet, withholding effort in teams. Technically, there is a little difference between these terms. So free riding, that's when there is some sort of a benefit and you sort of don't do your work, but still get the benefits. Social loafing, that's when you just simply don't do your work, but it doesn't necessarily involve some sort of benefits. Shirking, that's when you just basically, doesn't have to be a team. You may be shirking your duties at work, even if you're the only person working on it. So we kind of will work about all of those in general. And so withholding effort. So when you are working in a group and you're not doing your best or not doing much. And so I'll say right away, so for me, this study was necessitated not by the need to publish, but by real life challenges. Again, if you don't know, let me explain you one thing about researchers. So professors have to publish. We have this expression, publish or perish. So if you work at a major university, usually research is part of your job and you have to produce papers, as they say. And in most of the cases, the way it works is that people get together and think, so what can we study? So, I think this may be an interesting idea. Yeah. Anna Marie, do you think it would be publishable? Yeah, I think maybe, we can publish it in Jim. So let's write it. And so we are always searching for something that would be publishable, meaning that we are always on the lookout for an idea that is interesting, that potentially can be published. Well, with Xculture, and particularly when it comes to free writing, it's the opposite for me. So I don't really care if it's going to be published. In fact, there is a paper that I will be talking about that got a Best Paper Award like 3 years ago, and I still haven't even submitted it to a journal. But I needed to do that paper because I needed the answers. We have thousands of people, over 6,000 people this semester. They're working in almost 1,000 teams. And so we need to figure out how to organize the process in a way that people have a good experience, and free writing damages that experience. So for me, it's a practical necessity, just like a manager at a company needs the answer not to publish it, but to know how to manage the teams. Same thing here. So that was a very much, a necessity rather than just curiosity. And so it happens a lot. In fact, if you read just about any study on teams, you will see that rewriting happens almost always. And it's estimated that somewhere between 15 to 30% of the people do not meet the expectations of their teams. Remarkably, regardless of the type of the population. So it happens in student teams, it happens in executive teams, it happens in employee teams. So it seems like some people just, don't work hard enough. And again, it can be because they are busy, sick, broke up with a boyfriend, girlfriend, cannot focus, or sometimes simply not, serious, committed, lazy, maybe even lazy. And so with 15 to 30% of the people on average, if let's say a team is 5 to 5 to maybe 10 people, that means that in every team there would be probably 1, maybe 2, and possibly even more people. Now, all the studies have shown, and we actually tested this picture, so to speak, in our own research in Xculture. We see that free writing has a much greater damage than the loss of sort of hands and brains. So if you have 10 people, and let's say 2 of them stopped working, theoretically, you would think that it would be a loss of about 20% of productivity. So you had 10 people, now there are only 8, so 20% fewer sort of hands and brains or whatever the people do, right? In reality, the performance suffers much, much more, disproportionately more. And the reasons for that is, obvious. Dissatisfaction, tension, conflict. Even if everybody is still happy with what's going on, you at the very least need to sort of meet and discuss the situation. Bobby is not participating. What do we do? Who's going to do Bobby's job? So you have what we call process losses. So you have to reshuffle your workload. You have to decide who's going to be doing what now with Bobby not participating. And then obviously, again, it takes time, it takes effort, it creates conflicts, dissatisfaction. And so all of a sudden, a dropout, let's say 1 or 2 people out of 10, but your productivity may suffer. Literally, you may lose 20, 30%, 50, 60%, several times more than what you would expect just based on the number of people alone. So let me talk about first the meta-analysis. So this is a study where we found 88 papers that conducted research in 165 samples. So meaning that there were multiple samples in some of those papers. And so they looked at basically free writing, what leads to free writing, what free writing leads to. And so they published the results. And so I sort of did the job for you instead of you going to Google Scholar, looking for those papers and reading them one by one. I'm going to sort of summarize the results for you as to what they found. And so the way a meta-analysis works is you kind of take, not really an average, so there is much more complicated math, but in a sense, let's say 20 studies looked at how free writing correlates with, for example, age. And so each of them gave you some sort of a result, and I kind of take those correlations and give you the average result. And so it's a nice way to summarize a lot of numbers in a simple way so that you don't have to read all those 88 publications, and you can get a nice summary here. So a little bit about those studies. So most of them studied free writing using student samples, which is sort of potentially a problem because maybe students behave differently than employees. But at the same time, for me, it's a good thing because, I deal primarily with the student samples myself. So these studies kind of used the same population. So for me, it's a little bit more sort of generalizable and valid in that respect. And so typically they would do something like this, like a study, like you see a picture here at Tug of War. So they would do, for example, when they study the effects of, let's say, incentives. So there would be a game like this in one condition where people just do it for fun, and in another condition where people get some sort of a prize if they win. And so they then see if free riding occurs in one versus the other. The way they measure free riding usually is they would sort of, literally put, there is a device called dynameter. So it's a device that measures, in this particular case, essentially force. And so they would put it right in the middle where this kind of orange, flag is. And then they would just measure how hard people pull on that rope in one condition versus another. And from that, they sort of, make inferences whether people tried harder or less, for example, when there was an award. Another condition of this, or another form of this study was, for example, they would also do tug of war, and they would want to see if people kind of pull harder when their individual effort is monitored. And so what they would do is, in one condition, there would be a dynameter in the middle here, and only in the middle. And in another condition, there would be one between each sort of person. I'm not sure if you're going to see my whiteboard here, but essentially it would be like a rope, and then each person has a little like additional rope, and there is this device right in the, between the main rope and you. And so this way we can measure how hard you pull individually when we know how hard you pull individually, and then how hard you pull when you are in a team and you can hide behind your team members. And then we just, measure that, total force. And so they would see if people would, are more likely to freeload when, for example, their individual performance is also monitored. Now, I'm going to ask you, so do you think, for example, people work harder when individual effort is observed, or it doesn't really matter? There are many of you, obviously, we cannot survey all of you. Maybe you can put something in the comments. But you probably can guess that, yes, when we see each, well, actually, let's see. I see some comments here. So yeah, many of you say that you think it matters, and it does matter. So people who pull harder when they are being observed individually. Same thing, for example, when people are lifting some sort of an object, again, or clapping, they would have like literally a microphone in some conditions by each person's sort of, hands, and in some just one common microphone, and then they, measure if the total sort of noise was harder or louder when people were, observed, their individual performance was observed. But anyway, here are some of the predictors of free riding or wetting. So before I get into this, I actually want to ask you, so what do you think or which variables do you think are the best predictors of free riding? So why people free ride, and what, like if let's say you had a, group of 100 people and you had to make a prediction who's going to be a free rider, a freeloader. So what would you sort of measure? What would you observe to make that prediction? And let's say you can, maybe conduct some sort of a survey, look at the demographic data. So like, for example, Motello here says laziness, but Motello, that's, you speak like a mathematician. You know this joke about a hot air balloon descending somewhere in the, I don't know, fields in Scotland. And so a guy from the hot air balloon sees someone on the ground and is shouting, "Hey, sir, would you tell me where I am?" And the guy looks up at him and says, "Yes, you're in a gondola of a hot air balloon." And the guy says, "Oh, you must be a mathematician." And the guy says, "Yes, how did you know?" "Well, because only a mathematician can give such a precise yet useless answer." And so you're absolutely correct. Laziness probably plays a role, but I mean, laziness is a very tricky construct. I mean, how do you define it? How do you measure it? I mean, essentially, I'm asking you which of those people will be the laziest one. And so will it be the youngest? Will it be, I don't know, from a specific country? Will it be men or women? Will it be maybe a person with a certain type of personality? So yes, you are correct. Laziness probably matters, but it's not a thing that we can easily manage. Measure. It's something, Commitment is a little bit better. So Alejandro here is saying, but again, kind of hard to measure, but yeah, that's something that is more suitable for measurement. Many times what they're going to win. So essentially, Andrea is saying that maybe incentives. Very good. Alejandro is also saying motivation, but again, this one's tricky too, Motivation essentially is free riding. So essentially I'm asking you which of those will have no motivation, which of those will not participate. So I suppose, again, we can measure maybe incentives, motivation in terms of how interested you are to participate in advance. But this one's a little trickier. Anything else? So because so far, I don't think you named anything that the studies have shown to predict free riding. All right, let me show you what research has shown so far. One, a very strong effect has the potential for social loafing, essentially individual effort not tracked. So when people know that they can hide behind others' backs and the individual performance is not evaluated on a regular basis, people will free ride a lot. So that is a very strong predictor. But and then you also have all kinds of things, like cohesion in the team, role ambiguity, how clearly the role is specified. People from collectivist cultures tend to free ride a little bit more. Commitment actually does come up, so wonderful, Alejandro, you actually got that one correctly. But the one that struck me most, trust matters a lot, how much people trust each other. But the one that struck me most, and that seems to be the second strongest predictor, that is perceived free riding. So when I think that others are not pulling hard enough, I will stop pulling too. Or when I think that others are not, doing their share of the project, whatever that is, I will stop participating. We'll get to that one in a few minutes, because if I can tell you anything about free riding, like if there is one thing that I would like you to remember, this is the most important one. So people stop working when they think others are not working. And we'll get back to that in a few minutes, because this is the trickiest, most interesting, most important observation. Consequences of free riding, is it really bad? Oh, yes, it is bad. So it damages everything. So studies show again and again, team performance suffers, both objectively and as people see it. And so the scariest part is that the actual performance suffers even more than what we think about it. So even more than perceived. Job burnout, team cohesion suffers, motivation, job satisfaction, everything goes down. What's remarkable about these numbers also is that they're extremely large. Again, I'm not sure how much research you've done, but when you look at research in what we call social sciences, research on human behavior, psychology, management, maybe education, sociology. There was this wonderful study a few years ago that looked at over 2 million publications in these fields, and they took an overall average effect size, as they say, an overall average correlation. And so the overall average correlation of all published studies in peer-reviewed journals was 0.18, so 0.18. So meaning that the correlation overall in all of these studies is relatively weak. So when you watch the news and the anchor says, scientists in the United States have shown that A affects B, wine is good for you or whatever. On average, they showed a correlation of 0.18, so 1.8. And so that explains, if you kind of look at it as variance explained, 4% of differences. So it basically explains a tiny little thing. So there is an effect, but it doesn't explain much. And so what strikes me here is that each of these does not necessarily, explain everything, but these are the effects that are 2-3 times as strong as what we normally see in social sciences. So this is probably the most sort of persistent, robust set of results I've ever seen, not only in my own research, but in research period. So very strong. I'll skip the moderators, that's kind of for geeks, but now let's talk a little bit about ex-culture research. And so in this case, one of the challenges is that, or one of the advantages, I guess, for us, but one of the challenges in studying free riding is the following. The truth is that there are not many teams out there in the wild that one can study. What I mean by that is the following. When you read research on teams, and again, you will be managers, many of you probably already manage people, but soon enough you will graduate and you will probably have to manage people. And teams will be essentially the main unit of your organization, and you will use teams to do all kinds of projects. You will manage teams, you will be a member of a team. When it comes to studying teams though, when you look at research, there have been literally hundreds, if not thousands of studies published over the years, thousands probably. The kind of funny thing is that there are usually 2 types of studies. One, most of them would be a very small number of student teams that complete a short simulation in the classroom. What I mean by that is that most of the studies have been conducted using, a professor would have, let's say, 30 students in the classroom. And the professor says, today we want to study, for example, free writing. So let me split you into, let's say, 6 teams of 5 people, and we will play this game for 10 minutes and I will observe you. And so the problem with that is, obviously, one, usually there are 5, maybe 10, maybe 15 teams at most. So it's still not a very large number. Second, it's a simulation. It's not a real organizational team. So it's a very short, obviously the way we behave in a game in a classroom may be very different from how we behave when we are in a work team as part of our main job. So there is all kinds of, generalizability problems here. But then there is a second type of the studies that use real, organizational teams. And almost all of those are actually case studies, meaning that it's an observation of one single team. And the reason for that is because in the real world, in the organizational world, there are not many teams that exist in a large number in the same place, working on the same thing at the same time. Meaning that even if you are a billionaire, you marry Bill Gates' daughter, and he says, all right, now all my money is yours. I give you Microsoft. Now you own it or co-own it. And so you're like, okay, I'm going to study teams. Microsoft has tens of thousands of employees. They have thousands of teams. I'm going to study teams. But you come to the organization and you realize, yes, they have thousands of teams, but each team is working on a very different project at a different time, different schedule, different management, different incentives. And all of a sudden you cannot really compare them. So if you wanted to do some experiments, you can't. All you can do is maybe observe one or a few of those teams. And then you want to do some experiments, but the manager of the team says, oh, we can't do it. We think this way will work better. And so we cannot allow you to do it a different way because it's my, profitability. I cannot change how I manage this team just for your study. You can sit, you can watch, maybe you can do some sort of a survey of these people, but that's all I will allow you to do at this time. And so the problem here is that it's almost impossible to find a large number of teams working on the same thing at the same time under the same conditions in an organization, let alone, do some experimentation or ask survey, ask those people to complete a survey every week. And so as a result, teams are very, very hard to study. Now, when it comes to free writing, it's even worse because you not only have to find a bunch of teams, you have to find a bunch of teams with free writers. And that's even harder because, just detecting them is difficult. It's not always obvious who the free writers are. And so as a result, there is really not that much research on free writing. And as I said, all that we do, like 97%, was based on student teams in the simple experiments like I explained to you. Well, luckily, we have Xculture, and thank you so much for participating. In fact, some of the results I will be talking about were probably conducted with you as experimental subjects. And so here are some of the results that we found. But before I get to that, let me actually show you a short video here because I will be talking about this thing a lot. Or let me ask you this question and then I'll show you a short video. So you may remember that you had weekly peer evaluations when you did Xculture. And one of the questions in those weekly peer evaluations in most semesters, I think we didn't do it in 1 or 2, so I'm not sure when you participated, so maybe it was one of those, but in most semesters we have this question that reads like this. So, of all the work completed by your team last week, what % was completed by each team member? And you would see the list of team members, and then you have to assign percentages, and it has to be 100%. Like if it doesn't add up to 100%, it will not allow you to advance. And so when you have, let's say, 7 people, on average, you get what, about 15% or something like that per person to get 100%. And that's what we see. So if you add them up, you kind of by default get 100%, but also when you add up for the whole 6,000 people, you add the peer evaluations, you get 100%. But the trick here is this. One of these people is you, right? So let's say, for example, I am Waylon this time, so that's me. And so I'm attributing these percentages, and as you can guess, I probably give myself a little bit more. So let's say on average, everybody should get 15, but maybe I'll give myself 20, and everybody I'll give a little bit less, maybe give them 12. Now, if I take every person's self-evaluation for the whole cohort, what do you think it adds up to? How much do you think I get? So you probably can guess that it will be somewhat a little bit higher because, as I said, I tend to give myself a little bit more. But if I add all of these self-evaluations, so if I add for an average team, what Jorge gave himself, what Sarah gave herself, Prashant, Waylon, John, Billy, and Gunther. And so when I add up all of their self-evaluations, how much do you think I'll get? can you type your guess here? So in the perfect world, when everybody is sort of very objective, has perfect information, knows exactly who does what, it should be exactly 100, right? I mean, it's impossible. But people sometimes have different perceptions about how much they do compared to others. So how much do we get? Oh, you guys are smart. So actually you're getting numbers that are close, 230 on average. So you gave me 175, you give me 204, yeah. So it's, people overestimate their own performance in global virtual teams by about a factor of 2.3. Now, let me show you a very short video here. You can see this YouTube video. I'll show you the beginning. I'll show you the beginning of the video, like the first few minutes, but then you can watch the whole thing later on because later it talks about something else. All right.
This headline went viral. Nearly half of men say they do most of the homeschooling. 3% of women agree. I bring this up not to debate who's right, but because it's a great example of something called egocentric bias. Most people think they do most of the work. For example, researchers have asked authors of multi-author papers what percentage of the work they personally did. And when they add up those percentages, the sum is on average 140%. When couples are asked to estimate how much of the housework they do, the combined total is almost always over 100%. Now, you might think this is because people want to appear more helpful than they actually are, but that's not it. When couples are asked what fraction of the fights they start or how much of the mess is theirs, the total is again over 100. People think they do more of the work, but they also think they cause more of the problems. So why is this? I think it's simply because you experience and remember vividly all of what you do, but not all of what everyone else does. So naturally, you overestimate your own contributions and underestimate others.
So I'm going to stop here with the video. You can watch the rest, but that's exactly what we see. And so what surprises me that we see an even bigger discrepancy between self-evaluations and other evaluations. And I believe the reason here is because we have global virtual teams. So when you work in the same room, when you live in the same house, for example, like in the studies, the guy here cited, you at least can observe each other more frequently. You are in the same office, you're in the same room, you're in the same, assembly line. You can see each other's performance. When it comes to global virtual teams, you can't because you're all in different locations. And that creates this problem of not people lying. I don't think they're lying. I think they genuinely believe that they do more work than others because it's very hard to see others' work. You communicate by email maybe, or whatever communication tools you use, maybe once or twice a week. And so you see what you do, but you don't see what others do, and your brain does not perceive it. Now, remember I told you the most important thing that if I can tell you, the predictor of free writing, anyone remembers what that was? So it was the perception of how little others do. And so here is the problem. Here is the fundamental problem that I cannot solve. The problem is that the way our brain works is that it does not perceive what it doesn't see. So I do not perceive what others do if I don't see it. And so the problem is that even when you have a perfect team where everybody contributes exactly the same amount of work, of effort, I will still be thinking that I'm doing about twice as much as others. Not because they are doing less work, but because that's how my brain works. And so the fundamental problem is that even if everything's perfect, I don't think it's perfect. I think I'm doing more than others. And because one of the strongest predictors of my probability of stopping, working is me thinking that others are not working, then you sort of have this kind of fundamental problem because you cannot have a situation where everybody thinks that everybody works equally well. So the situation is that most people will think most of the time that others work less than they do. And that creates a very strong incentive to work less because, why should I when they don't? And so that's the issue. Now, what can you do with that? So what can you do with prevention? I don't know if you can change people's perceptions, but there are a few things that you can do to sort of, to intervene when it comes to, reducing free riding. So there are two intervention opportunities. Again, complicated model, but essentially it says you can change the team design. So even before they start working, you can do all kinds of things to change team design. And I will not be getting into too many numbers, but I'll tell you a little bit about what we found. So we find that there is less free riding in smaller teams. So when teams are smaller, people are less likely to free ride. possibly because it's harder to hide behind others' backs because, you know, there are fewer people to observe, so you are more visible. And then also diversity. So when the team is more diverse, people are likely to free ride more. So the larger the team, the more free riding, and the more different the team, the more free riding. And again, by difference, I mean multiple cultures and things like that. And again, we don't know why, but one of the theories says that we sort of remember somebody said commitment there. So we tend to be more, there is this theory that is called attraction theory. So we are more attracted, more committed, more comfortable, feel more socially connected and obliged to people who are like ourselves. So people who share our sort of, you know, background, you know, watched the same movies, played the same sports, you know, grew up in the same environment. And so with those people, we not only feel a stronger connection and are more attracted to them, but also we feel kind of more social obligation too. So we connect with them as people, and so that sort of makes us uncomfortable to not, you know, meet their expectations. Whereas when people are very different, in many cases, I don't have that connection. And so it's a little bit easier for me to sort of pay less attention to their feelings. So it's just two words on the screen. I don't know, I'll be sort of, you know, stereotypical here. Let's say, I don't know much about, let's say, Chinese culture. So when I have a guy on the team named Wei Long, I don't have much connection to him. I don't know what his interests are. It's hard for me to connect. And so I kind of will be less obliged or feel less obliged to perhaps, you know, meet his expectations. But if I have a guy from the same, you know, background as mine, we instantly connect. We have a lot of things to talk about, and sort of we feel a little bit more sort of, you know, how can I set up my friend, not do my work? Also, difficulty of entry reduces free riding. So we did a couple of semester's experiments where we made it very difficult to join a team. Like there would be additional, you know, tests, there would be additional sort of hurdles. And so people, in many studies, it had been shown that when membership in the organization becomes more difficult, when you have to sort of suffer to become a member, then you feel much more committed. And some of these studies were actually almost like to the point of being stupid. Like, for example, the professor would create a fake poetry club on campus, and then would admit some people as long as they apply, but other people would have to go through like some, you know, grueling initiation, you know, interview. And so some of those questions in the interview would be very uncomfortable. So like very personal questions. So something that you sort of, you know, you have to suffer through that interview. But then they would put all those people in the first session and, you know, read some stupid poetry and ask, how much did you like it? And so people who didn't suffer, who just got admitted, you know, because they applied, they say, yeah, that was crap. I didn't like it at all. But those who had to suffer, they say, oh, this was wonderful. You know, was such a good. So they literally feel like, well, it must be very exclusive if you know, I had to go through so much pain to become a member. And so they literally more satisfied, but also they're more committed, they're more motivated to participate. And so they're less likely to shirk. And then acquaintanceship, this one's interesting. We actually are in the process right now of testing yet another iteration of this study. So in the early stages of X-Culture, we would get directly to the, you know, to business when the teams are formed. So we don't have much time. We have only about 8 weeks to complete the project. And so there is a lot of work to do. And so the students would be placed on teams on Monday. And by the end of the first week, they must give us the first deliverable. So they must, for example, select the company and do market analysis right there. So they get right to business. Then at some point, I started seeing studies that show that when people are given even a few minutes to get to know each other, they sort of perform much better because now they see each other as a person. Again, like, for example, a typical study of this kind would be in economics. If you know what the ultimatum game is, it's a game where people are given sort of $1 and or whatever the amount, and they have to split that money between the two of them, with one person being sort of the giver, the other person being the receiver. And so the giver can split the money whichever way he wants or she wants, but if the receiver refuses the offer, then the experimenter gets the money back. But if the receiver accepts the money, then the parties keep the money. And so normally you would expect that people would give, you know, like you get 50 cents, I get 50 cents. It sounds fair, I accept, so we both get 50 cents. But people are smart. So I figure that if I give you only 40 cents and keep 60 cents to myself, you probably will still accept. Because if you reject, we both lose the money. 40 cents is better than nothing. So even though it's not fair, but you would say, oh, what the heck, I'll take it. And so, but maybe I'm kind of greedy. Maybe I want to go as far as 80 cents. I'll figure, you will understand that 20 cents is still better than nothing. You will accept. So at some point, you know that you will push it too far. If I give you only 2 cents, you'll probably say, screw it. I don't want you 2 cents. I'm going to punish you. So I'm going to refuse. So, but anyway, doesn't really matter how that game goes. A fascinating line of research. There have been like hundreds of variations of this game. But in one of the experiments, they looked at how much people would offer each other if they first get to know each other. And so the way I run this experiment, I've done it many times, I would give 1 minute to each pair of people, like usually my students, but in one condition during that minute, they have to multiply some random numbers. And in the other condition, the people have 1 minute to tell a childhood memory to each other. And so this way, one condition, they, still where they were, they just did some math. But in this condition, now I know something about you. I know like one of your childhood memories. And then I look at the results, how much people offer, and dramatic difference. So people are much, much more likely to offer closer to 50-50 if now they spend just 1 minute getting to know each other versus when they were completely strangers and, see each other for the first time. So same thing with X culture. So we thought, well, let's maybe give people some time to get to know each other. And so first we started giving 1 week. So first week you have to do nothing other than get to know each other. There is no task. You don't have to select your clients. You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is just get to know each other. And in fact, we even had a little test at the end where we ask a few questions like, does this person have a pet? Does this person have a job outside school? Things like that. Then it actually showed a very, very dramatic improvement. And so we thought, hey, maybe we should give them a little bit more time. Let's give them 2 weeks. And we saw an improvement from 1 to 2 weeks. So there was a dramatic improvement again, like peer evaluations are higher, performance is better, the quality of the actual reports is better, satisfaction is higher, so all kinds of things. Then last semester, we actually pushed it so far in one team, we gave them 3 weeks. And so you understand you have 8 weeks to do, and so you waste 3 weeks on nothing but getting to know each other. It was better than 1, but worse than 2. So we started seeing these declining sort of marginal returns. So 3 weeks, that's probably not a very good idea. That's too much. You spend almost half of your time just getting to know each other. But 1 week was better than nothing, and 2 weeks was better than 1. So getting to know each other before people even start working makes sense, even if it takes kind of some of the time that you were going to spend on the experiment. On the project. But then the second sort of intervention opportunity is when the team starts working. And so here we started trying some interventions when free riding actually occurs. So when we have bona fide confirmed free riders, the whole team tells me that Bobby is doing nothing. So what can you do here? And so we tested several interventions. Actually, you know what? Let me stop here for a second. And again, what would you do? So let's say you're a manager of this project and you look at the weekly peer evaluations and you see that there are several teams where there are, bona fide, real free riders. Week after week, the team tells me that Bobby is not participating at all. So what can you do here? What would be your sort of managerial response? Contact him and ask what's going on. That's actually a very good one. Yeah. What else? So Andrea, maybe you can raise your hand and explain exactly what you will do. So how will it go? So you call the guy, contact him, and then what do you do? Don't be shy, Andrea. I'm not sure if you have a microphone, but if you do join us. And meanwhile, anybody else, what would you guys do? Remove him, punish. Yeah.
So hi, Dr. Bass.
Okay. Yeah, Andrea, go ahead. So sorry, I didn't see you. Yeah.
Don't worry. Actually, I will ask him ask him which is the reason, like maybe he's not really interested or he has no time or what's the reason behind the problem,
And then try to help once you know what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good.
But I think something important is that I will do that when the problem starts, so maybe you can address it in the right time. Mm-hmm. And maybe don't generate the problem and also affect all the team because of that. Yeah.
And I see most people agree with you. Alfredo says, ask and understand what the problem is. Manuela says, contact him, contact and give him a warning. So that's a little bit different, but still contact him. Then Paola says, ask about the problem. And your professor seems to be the most what's the word here? Remove him, punish him. So the most aggressive. All right, well, let me show you what we did and what the results were. So very good suggestions. So we did, in one condition, we did nothing, like we deliberately ignored it. And so it was 887 teams. So we did literally nothing. We just said, we will not, we don't even want to hear about it. In another condition, we allowed people to complain, but took no action. So we added the weekly peer evaluations where people can tell us that there is a problem, but we did nothing about that. Sorry, in that case, it was a complaint, like they could submit a form complaint, but we did nothing with that. Then we allowed people to complain through peer evaluations. Essentially, each week we added peer evaluations, but we did not share them with the students. So we see them, students know that we know, but the managers know, but we don't react to it. Then we allowed peer evaluations to be shared. So, and probably that's what you saw, because that's what we've been doing lately. So not only we do weekly peer evaluations, but each week we send them back to the students and say, this is what everybody got. So here we showed the students that not only we know what you told us, but we want the students to know that we know it, because we're going to show you the numbers. And then the fifth conditions was exclude if repeated, basically, exclude, punish the person if the, free riding continues. And we started testing another one in the last couple of semesters, which we call coaching, which is basically what all of you recommended, which is, reach out, try to help, see what's going on. And the truth is all of those have some effect. So everything, is better than nothing. But as you can see, this exclude, basically do nothing, just exclude if they don't participate. It's the most effective method. It reduced free riding by 47%, almost cut in half. And kind of ironically, that's the cheapest method. So we say, if your peer evaluations go below 2.0, we will kick you out from the project. We will not call you. We will not ask what's going on with you. We will just kick you out of the from the project. And that turns out to be the most effective method. Coaching actually kind of helps, but doesn't help too much. So it's very expensive, very costly, because you have to contact so many people. They give you all kinds of, sorry to say that, crap. They start telling, oh, they're lying, I'm doing all the work, they're just envious. Or, oh, I'm so sorry, I broke up with my girlfriend, boyfriend, but I'll start working tomorrow. And usually it doesn't help. In fact, they feel that now they can free ride, it seems so. Because now they explain the situation, now the management knows that they have this difficult situation, busy at work, problems in the family. And so it almost seems like they use it as an excuse not to start working again. So surprisingly and somewhat dishearteningly, it is that, threat of exclusion works best. And the funny thing is we don't even need to exclude many people. All we have to do is just tell them you will be excluded if. And so that seems to take care. So out of 5,000 last semester, we had to exclude 6 people total. So most people never had to even do it. So there were some people who got the warning, but once they got the warning, they were like, I don't, So that seems to, so your professor is apparently the wisest person here, because she's
Can
not.
I jump in, Vas, and ask a question?
Yes.
Are there gender and cultural differences in the response to negative peer evaluations? I'm imagining some cultures might be embarrassed to receive a negative evaluation and would even free ride more, or just stop working more out of embarrassment of having received a bad feedback.
This is a very good question. And my experience, so first, sort of, full disclosure, much of my work for the first 10, 15 years in academia was on culture. And so I spent literally the last maybe 15 years trying to prove that culture explains much, if not everything. And there is even an expression in our kind of inner circles, we say, if you cannot explain something, blame it on culture. And then I started getting a little suspicious when I started doing my own research more deeply and started seeing that maybe culture does not explain everything, and maybe it doesn't even explain much. But then for one thing that I noticed was that, for example, again, when you took X-Culture, you may remember that at the beginning of the project, we had a question with a set of sort of, challenges. And we asked, to what extent do you expect this to be a challenge? Time zone differences, language differences, cultural differences. And then at the end of the project, we asked you the same question, but this time it was phrased, looking back, to what extent each of those was a challenge. Time zone differences, cultural differences, technology, cultural differences and things like that. And so what's remarkable is at the beginning, cultural differences are predicted to be the biggest challenge. Most of you say culture will be a problem. looking back, it's almost zero. Like the problem was that somebody was not participating. The problem was that, we couldn't schedule a meeting because of the time zone differences. Culture, oh no, yeah, that Chinese guy, yeah, no big deal. I mean, people say sometimes that it was an issue, but it's much less. And so when we do peer evaluations, again, your professor is very wise here. So she pointed out to a problem that is sort of a problem that creates a problem that is really not a problem, but it does create a problem. And that is how people perceive evaluations and numbers. And I must have, like, if I would have gotten $1 for every time I get an email that says, oh, it's so American to measure everybody and express it in numbers and put those numbers every week. I mean, this is so like offensive in some cultures. This is so inappropriate. This is so, American, which is strange because I'm not an American actually. And so people think that it would be a problem, but we did rigorous studies and actually, no, it's not a problem. Meaning that we did expect that there would be more conflicts. We did expect that there would be more tensions. In fact, Ernesto did find some evidence that there is a little bit more problems in a sense that people become a little bit more sort of stressed because of that. But when you look at the actual final outcomes, quality of the work, satisfaction, free writing itself, it seems to do good. So all of those indicators go up. And even if it does create some tension, which possibly it does, even if it does make some people uncomfortable, with constant evaluation, which again, probably it does, it seems like those consequences are much weaker than the fact that now everybody works harder and there are fewer problems. And then when we finally do exclude the person, again, it's almost counterintuitive. You would think that there were, let's say, 7 people and one of them got kicked out. So you would think that that would lead to, less performance because you have fewer people left. But in reality, it actually improves performance. People say, okay, justice has been served. Now we are sort of recouped, revitalized, and we can go ahead. And so even though there are fewer people left, they actually do more work and better work than when they had the free rider on the team. So it seems like, yes, all these constant evaluations may be problematic, but they do help in the end, even if it comes at the expense of perhaps some, uncomfortable situations, especially for people from some cultures, if I can put it.
Other question as well.
Yes, please.
Have you tried? Have you tried using? You sent us a weekly message with everything that's happening. Have you tried sending a message stating that you've already excluded some free riders, even if you didn't, just to keep everybody working tight? I don't know.
Sort of scare them a little bit.
Yeah, because you said we tried the scary part, but we did excluded some. So
Maybe
you took action.
try
But
that. Yeah.
the scary, I don't know if that's a first step you could try and people would turn around. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds a little sort of borderline, maybe unethical if we kind of scare them too much. But yeah, it's a very interesting idea. What we do now is, as I said, once anybody's peer evaluations go below 2.0, we automatically tell, send them the warning. And then without any discussion, we exclude them if if the situation does not improve by the next week. The truth is that each week we have about 50 people, 60 people who get the warning out of several thousand. But literally 99% of them behave by the next week. Once they get the warning, once they are threatened that they will be excluded, they immediately reconnect with the team and do a good job. Of those people whom we exclude, as I said, it would be like 5, 10, maybe to 12 people a semester. About half actually then reconnect with the team, reconcile, make up, and then the team comes back to us and says, okay, now we want Bobby back. So he explained to us what was going on. He promised to do a good job. So some of them actually return back to the team even after the exclusion. So it seems like, it does the trick. Again, there are still some people whose peer evaluations are lower than expected, less than what we desire, but at least they try to, and at least they show some effort as opposed to disappear completely. So, yeah. But maybe we should try being even more kind of aggressive. Although, again, we have to be a little careful here because, these are still students. We have to keep them happy. Not to mention that, at some point people may, you can bend the stick, but at some point it can snap. And so you can be very, you should probably be very careful, not to push it too far. Finally, a couple more things. We did an interesting study published last year, I believe, where we interviewed free riders. So we went back in time and found 104 sort of free riders who were really free riders, so bad that they were excluded from the teams. And so to my huge surprise, I mean, for some of them, it's been like 2 years since they participated. To my very big surprise, 86 of them agreed to be interviewed. Like I thought, why would they, they literally, some of them disappeared in the middle of the semester and we never heard from them back. But when I reached out to them saying that, as you remember, you were excluded from the team and we want to know your side of the story, almost all of them, that's like unheard of, 83% response rate, that's a huge, normally you get like 10, 20. So, but they said, oh, no, yeah, let me tell you my story. So people apparently take it very, very seriously when they get kicked out from the team. I guess evolutionary, we want to be members of the team. Our survival depends on it. And so when you're excluded from the team, apparently it had such a strong effect on them that even for some of them a couple of years later, they still wanted to tell their side of the story. They still wanted to be interviewed. So we interviewed 86 of those people. And so we basically asked them all kinds of questions. And so here is the summary. One, to my big surprise, 65% of them were relatively positive in their comments. So they didn't swear, they didn't say, bad things. About 13% were really mad and primarily provided negative comments. What's also interesting that 84% of them denied that they were free riders. So it was kind of funny. The first question was, so did you free ride? And 84% to that first question said, no, I didn't, they lie, they didn't see me doing the work, or maybe they just didn't like me and they lied to you. Or in reality, I did a lot of work, they just didn't realize it, or, things like that. So I was a good team member. But funny enough, then we asked a few other questions, and then like question 4 or 5 was, so tell us, why did you not participate enough? And then they would start explaining why they did not participate enough, even though a few minutes ago they said that actually I did participate. And so they gave us all kinds of reasons, but the most important thing for us, eye-opening, was that almost all of them said that it was some problems in the beginning of the project, in the early stages. So essentially they said that, like here, most people said in the first days, I kind of missed them. I didn't get engaged right away. And then by the time when I was ready to do something, like a week later, the team already was formed, they already became friends, they already were, talking about something, and I didn't know what to do. So I sort of became, I felt like I was fell behind and I didn't know what to do. And so it seems like those first few days are really, really important, because if people don't belong from that first moment, they will sort of feel, not part of the group, and they may literally miss some of the instructions, may miss some of the discussions and not know what to do. So it's not that they're lazy, it's just they sort of at that point, like, so what do you do? How do you do it? I don't know, I'm uncomfortable. And then they just, participate less and less, and then the whole thing just spirals out of control. Some people said that they were busy with other things like work study, and that's why they didn't participate, personal life, health problems, those kinds of things. But as I said, the biggest challenge seemed to be, that first initial few days were not very, productive, and then it just cascaded from there. And so to me, the lesson is that, those first few days are very important, and we should give people time to get to know each other. We should give people time to, to figure out the instructions and the workflow before we start requesting the real work, because if we start too early, some people will kind of miss that initial moment and will not be comfortable or will not know how to join the team. Mm-hmm. And then again, so there were a lot of questions, a lot of stuff. You can read the whole paper there, but if
Could I jump in and ask you a question, Vas?
Yes, go ahead.
I have a question here, a private message in the chat. In the audience, we have a woman named Jimena. She is a doctoral student in Mexico, but she's Ecuadorian and is a lecturer in Ecuador. And she's doing her PhD on pedagogies of using GBTs. And she is asking if you know if the platform for communication made any difference. And maybe that goes back to the how they started. Was there any platform, any communication method that proved to be a better communication method in the beginning?
This is a very, very good question. And let me answer it not with an answer, but with an invitation. Would you like to study this? And the reason I'm asking is because 3 years ago, I believe 4 years ago, there was a student from my business school, but he was majoring in information systems. So basically kind of IT for business. And so he asked that same question. He looked at the data. He even presented some sort of a paper somewhere at a conference, and he did find the effect. So there is a difference. So if you rely only on email versus when you have regular video, meetings and things like that. But then he got a job somewhere in the industry, lost interest, and I couldn't trace, so I basically didn't have the time to do it again myself, and I couldn't find anything, like any usable records from him. So the truth is, I know it does matter because that student found some effects. I didn't go deep enough, and it was for his like some course project or something like that. So I didn't help him with the development because it was supposed to be his individual project. But as I said, then he kind of disappeared, and we didn't really talk much about that anymore. So we do have perfect data for that. We know how people communicate, how frequently, what tools they use. We literally measure in some semesters every single week how many minutes they are on Skype, video, audio, chat, things like that. So we have all those records, but I didn't study them extensively. So we have so much data, and there are so many other studies going on. So if this is something that you may be interested in, maybe you should take a look at our data. Maybe we can do a study. I'm not sure if you want to do something like that for your dissertation, or if you're just interested to maybe write a paper. I believe it's a very promising study, and I cannot answer because I didn't really crunch the numbers. So maybe we can join forces and you can do that.
Perfect. You have to include me. I just wrote back to him in the private chat, like, ooh, you got an invitation for research.
Yeah, let's
let me join.
and now, Anna Marie, going back to your question about culture, this is where I think maybe culture will moderate the relationship. So maybe for some cultures that, you know, face-to-face kind of video contact is more important than for others. Who knows? So yeah. So if you ladies would like to, you know, to look at it, we do have the data. In fact, we have more data than, you know, than needed.
Okay, hold on. Jimena is asking a follow-up question. If students difficulty into the collaborative interaction and therefore the development of intercultural competencies, qué pena, Jimena, no estoy entendiendo bien. ¿Quieres venir y hacer la pregunta pues en español y podemos... Una pregunta más, aunque en mi tema no...
Ok, Amne,
Yeah.
yo puedo mejor en español porque aunque entiendo bastante lo que la parte, al escuchar no soy muy buena al hablar. Quería preguntarle al doctor Tara si cuando en un equipo, un Global Virtual Teams, existen varios freeriders, o sea, este tipo de estudiantes, eso dificulta la interacción colaborativa del equipo y por ende el aprendizaje intercultural. Quizás la existencia de freeriders dificulta un poco la interacción y por ende el que el equipo aproveche mejor esta, la oportunidad de la interacción con otras personas de otras culturas y
Okay.
es que disminuya el desarrollo de competencias afectivas, de competencias incluso comportamentales que podrían ellos adquirir al estar trabajando en los global.
Y con otros que no sean los mismos.
Claro, porque si hay más providers, entiendo que puede haber una relación directa entre esto y lo que estoy investigando.
Okay. Yeah, so she's asking if the existence of free riders affects the relationship in the team, not just with that free riders, but if all of the others who are working start to fight amongst themselves when there's a free rider in their presence.
Again, that's a very good question. We didn't really look at it that way. As I said, we know that the overall satisfaction goes down and the number of conflicts increases. So I suppose it does have an effect. But again, this is a good, interesting research opportunity. We know that, I skipped through that slide quickly, but there was one slide there that showed how presence of one free rider leads to more free riders. And so what we saw was that when the team has one free rider and only one, things get worse, but usually other people keep working. But once you have two free riders, the whole thing kind of, drops down. And so once you have two, you know that the other 3 or 4 will stop working within a week. There will be always one that kind of goes like this, at some point it levels out. So there is always 1 or 2 crazy guys who will keep working even if everybody else stops. But once you have more than one, that's where everybody says, all right, so if they're not working, why should I? So I assume that there would be something going on. There will probably, there will be more tension, more conflict, more dissatisfaction, because you realize now you have to do more work because they're not working. You have to spend all that time on the, coordination and, redistribution of the workload. So I would imagine that there is something, but again, didn't look at it. We do have the data though. So again, if you would like to maybe study that, I will be very happy to give you the data. So I imagine that, like in a family, I assume when there is a dysfunctional family member, kind of the whole, the rest of the family, as they say, one bad apple spoils the whole barrel. So I think it could be the same thing here, but we don't really know for sure. So that's a very good question. So if you are planning to do some research, maybe going to graduate school, it can become an interesting study. So you would think that it only affects the person who is, but yeah, I guess, that's interesting.
Perfect. Thank you.
So there was one more thing that I wanted to say, the last slide. Again, I don't want to get into all the details, but when we asked the interview in the interviews, when we asked the free riders, so what would you do differently? A lot of interesting ideas, but the one that was almost universally, universal, they say I would basically talk more to my team. So if you feel like you are not participating, if you feel like you're being excluded, if you feel like you're not sure what to do, talking to the team helps a lot. And most of them wish that they talked more, and they believe that would have changed the situation. So as to, if you happen to find yourself in this role, the team thinks that you're not participating, communication seems to be the, if not the cure, then at least a possible remedy. So, but yeah, so I'm going to stop here. I'm not sure if there are any other questions. As I said, I want to just reiterate the main things. So free riding happens a lot, much more than many people, would like. Second, when it happens, it creates all kinds of problems. And according to the research by, our own and others, damages everything from performance to psychological sort of conditions in the team. In terms of what predicts free riding, it seems like the most relevant and the most strong, two indicators are: one, individual effort visibility. So if people are observed individually, they are less likely to free ride when there is only a team level performance measure. So in that case, they will be much more likely to hide behind the backs of others. And so this one is easy to deal with. You add peer evaluations, you add individual performance indicators. So it's more about the design. So that's under your control. The other very strong predictor was me thinking that you're not doing the work. And that one is a little bit harder to deal with because, as we discussed, people tend to overestimate their own performance and underestimate performance of others. So even if everything's fine, I will still think that I do all the work and you do less. And so apparently, while it's still, within some balance, it's still okay. But once it get a little, once I start thinking that you really do too little, chances are that I will stop working as well, and that creates all kinds of problems. And so when you are a manager of a team, when you can design the team, give teams more time to get to know each other, provide opportunities for the team members to kind of, have that initial, honeymoon sort of, time. Second, smaller teams help, less diverse teams help, which is kind of strange because diversity helps with other things, but free riding apparently not a very good one. And then when free riding actually happens, yes, you can coach people, you can reach out to see what's going on, and all of that helps. There is still a strong effect, sizable effect, but it seems the most sort of cheapest and effective method is to simply tell, if you will not participate, you will be punished. And so exclusion, that's what we tried. Maybe there are other ways, like somebody was saying, talking about bonuses and maybe, compensation adjusted based on performance, probably a very good method, but especially if you make it sort of automatic. I will not negotiate with you, I will not listen to you, there will be a punishment if. So that seems to help. Although again, I would, as long as the resources are available, I would try to also, as you recommended, reach out to the person, ask. Maybe the person is lost, maybe the person doesn't know how to help, or maybe there was a conflict and there is a need to reconcile that conflict so that the group can work together again. So obviously those are all good tools, although they will be a little costlier. And if you happen to be
Sorry,
a free rider, talk.
I have two questions.
Yes.
So you said that the free riders in the interviews said that they wish that they had talked more. Do you feel like they really took responsibility and really do wish that they had talked more? Or were they kind of saying, I wish they had listened more, or I wish they had talked to me more?
That's a very good question. Yeah, possibly. I guess both ways, maybe even. And I think when they say, I wish I talked more, they almost say that, I guess in many cases, they say, I wish I was a little bit more proactive. I wish I more kind of acted. But again, the other way around can be equally possible or plausible because, as we said, in many cases, people kind of felt that the team didn't need them or they didn't really know what they needed to do. And I'm sure if somebody from the team reached out to them and said, hey, Bobby, what's going on? Everything okay? I'm sure that would have, like, oh yeah, they care about me. So I'm sure that would have made a huge difference. So people are, wired to work in sort of groups. We want to belong. And I think when we see a sign of the group reaching out to me and saying, come on, join us, join, I think that makes, the person will definitely get, a shot of, dopamine or whatever, the cortisol, that we, feel good. And I think that definitely will help. So yeah, again, if you have a free rider on the team, I know it's easy to be mad. I know it's easy to, to say, oh, screw him, let's exclude him from the team. But maybe try to reach out to the person as a team member and say, hey, is everything okay? Maybe, so I will not be surprised that helped as well.
Yeah. Another question, I'm going to ask you a leading question now. I think I know the answer, but I don't think that you've said it, or at least loudly in this. So the students are probably thinking, yeah, of course we have free riders in X culture because we're students. Students can be busy. Students are lazy. But once we're in professional teams, we're not going to have this problem because professionals act so much more responsibly. What do you think?
No, that's not the. First of all, as I said, there have been a lot of studies, interviews with professional teams, and people complain about that. So it seems like people don't really change. But more importantly, don't forget that when you are a professional, you have many more demands and distractions in life. And we do have, like, for example, if you look at the age and, like we have some EMBA students, MBA students, the truth is that in that case, your team will be one of your projects. But now you have kids, you have spouses, you have other jobs, you have other projects that you need to do. So all of a sudden this becomes, you have so many more demands. And so Anna Marie, you can confirm here. So for example, when we look at our co-author teams, right? So, I mean, this is part of our job. We have to publish, and it's so common that people sign up to be a, co-author and then disappear. Much more, apparently even much more than what we see with the students. And guilty as charged, I'm sometimes that person. As I said, sometimes I'm a co-author and I'm just too busy with other things, and I, take weeks and weeks before I even write my thing. Second, again, sometimes people maybe, I don't know, going through a divorce, or a kid goes to college and I don't know what to do about that. So there are many other factors that can distract you, because while you're still a student, that's the only thing you do. Yes, you have several classes, but you don't really have much else to do in your life other than having some fun. So no, everything indicates that it's not going to be any different. And especially if it's there are different types of teams, but when we do like a GVT type of team, usually it would be a project team. So usually that's not the only thing you do at work. You have all kinds of things, but this is one of the projects you're involved in. And yeah, so probably not so. You will see it much more often than, than you. I always say that my favorite type of movies are movies about time travel. And I always wanted to, invent a time machine. But to some extent, X culture is kind of like a time machine. It does not allow you to go into the future, but it allows you to see the future. And if you think that once you are in a corporate team, you will have a different experience as a team member, I hate to tell you that, but no, you probably will see the same problems. There will be still somebody who will be too bossy. There will be still somebody who will be too quiet. There will be still somebody who will forget about the meeting. There will be somebody who will be lazy. There will be somebody who will, break up with a boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, and because of that will not be able to concentrate. You'll see exactly the same things, and maybe even to a greater extent, because as I said, the demands in life will be much greater at that time.
Perfect.
All right.
Yeah, we are definitely over time with you.
Yeah. My apology for that.
No, we're happy.